This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins. On the local news roundup, the city of Charlotte announces the investigation into allegations of unethical conduct on council made by a member of that body, and they have announced that that will be handled by an outside attorney. CMPD has posted a job opening for the chief's position, and the city has hired a California-based firm to help with that, with what will be a nationwide search through next month. The race may be 2 years away, but candidates for Tom Tillis's North Carolina U.S. Senate seat are ready to declare in both parties. Meanwhile, Tillis emphatically calls for the release of the Epstein files.
Release the damn files.
Officials statewide call for the General Assembly to uphold Governor Stein's veto of the concealed carry bill, and Charlotte civil rights icon James Ferguson dies. Here to talk about those stories and more is WFAE News politics reporter Steve Harrison. Mary C. Curtis is a columnist for Rollcall.com and host of their Equal Time podcast, and David Hodges is an investigative reporter for WBTV. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning, Mike.
Good morning, Mike.
So several months ago, Charlotte City Councilwoman Victoria Watlington levied allegations of unethical and possibly illegal activity on council around the same time that council met in a closed-door session to offer Police Chief Johnny Jennings a $305,000 settlement to a potential lawsuit. He had not yet filed the lawsuit. The interim city attorney, Anthony Fox, said he would conduct the investigation. Victoria Watlington called for a third party to investigate, and this week she got her way. Steve, what have they decided to do?
Yeah, the city council met in closed session about 3 weeks ago and went forward with this idea, with this plan to hire Charlotte attorney Patrick Flanagan to do this investigation. He'll be paid $300 an hour, capped at $25,000 for the whole thing. And Mike, like you said, Victoria Watlington and the interim city attorney had this standoff for weeks over how this investigation was going to move forward. She was really upset that he was going to do it himself because she felt like part of her complaints were with how he handled the police settlement. And so she was upset that he was going to be investigating he was going to be investigating himself, and she was refusing to participate. And so Councilmember Watlington has, in a way, kind of won this round and gotten it turned over to the outside.
How will he, Patrick Flanagan, the outside attorney, be handling this investigation, and what exactly is he investigating?
A very good question. Apparently, he has been setting up meetings with individual council members to talk about Councilmember Watlington's allegations of illegal and unethical activity, which she did dial back. She kind of walked those back. Those were very strong words, and she dialed that back soon after. But it is a bit of a because she didn't really say anything specific. I think he's just going to be talking to all council members and saying, like, do you know of any illegal activities? Yes or no?
The settlement that city council reached with the police chief came merely on the threat that he might sue over a series of text messages that were sent to him from former city council member Tariq Bakari, which went public and which the chief said damaged his reputation. That's all we knew about this, and that's all we really know about this. We wouldn't even know how much money was paid out had it not been for the fact that the chief revealed that amount himself. Are we likely to learn anything more about how and why this settlement was reached, or even the nature of the allegations that prompted the investigation from Victoria Watlington as a result of this investigation? Are we ever going to know?
Very hard to say what the direction of this investigation is going to go. I think we will hear a lot about the city council's deliberations and the process internally that led them to this decision and how city staff handled it. I think we'll kind of hear about that because that directly impacted them. Whether we really get inside the hood, Mike, and get in terms of the city's logic and reasoning for why they paid the settlement, I'm not sure this is going to go there.
And you were talking with us just before we went on the air about something I knew nothing about, and that is the fact that they need a reason to investigate this. Aren't the allegations reason enough?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question as to in the city council policy. When you do investigations like this, it is usually because someone has filed an ethics complaint. Well, in this case, no one did. And the city has then said, well, we really need to do this because we have to protect the airport's bond rating because there are these allegations out there and we've got, hundreds of millions of dollars of debt and we need to assure Mitch and Foodies and ratings that everything's fine. That I think is a bit of a puzzling statement. I went back into 2014 after Patrick Cannon was arrested on corruption charges. I went through the city's financial statements to its bondholders. The city never mentioned that. It wasn't a concern. They didn't think it was important. But now in 2025, we're being told like this is very crucial to the financial health of the city.
And that's strictly because they need a reason because nobody filed an ethics complaint. So they're not really concerned about the airport bond rating. Is what you're saying?
I mean, that's hard to say. I just know in
Okay.
the past, issues like this, real corruption charges, arrests, indictments, et cetera, the city did not feel compelled to disclose that to bondholders.
So, as I understand it, the contract with this private attorney, the outside attorney, was signed July the 8th. When will the investigation start? Will he have full access to everybody on council, to the police chief, all the parties involved? Is there any plan to release his findings when it's all over?
The investigator, the attorney, is trying to line up interviews with all the council members right now, and it's probably a little bit difficult because the city is technically on break. I think the big question, Mike, will be whether this is finished in time for the Democratic primary in early September. Councilmember Watlington is running for reelection. That is going to be an interesting deadline hanging over this process.
I don't know who's in charge of this other than the attorney. Now that he's been hired, is he completely in charge of this? And I ask because are there any mitigating factors here? Like, are there people who would like to see Victoria Watlington injured in some way by this?
Definitely, Councilmember Watlington, just in her tenure on council and especially in the last 2 years, has been a critic of the mayor at times, has not been an ally of hers. And so I think that's what kind of adds a little bit of extra curiosity to this investigation. Like I said, we have an election coming up. Whether the two are related at all, I don't know, but I do know that the timing and the city's urgency, the city and the city council want to get this done as soon as possible, which presumably means before the primary.
So I want to make sure we have a clear understanding of this because this is taxpayer money funding this outside investigation. True, it is capped at $25,000 plus whatever court associated expenses that Patrick Flanagan may incur. But since we're paying for this, and although it's a drop in the bucket, we're paying for this. Do we, by statute, by law, have a right to know of the outcome?
Yeah, we should get a report.
Okay.
The final report should be public. The city made the letter, kind of the hiring letter public. So, yeah, I would be shocked if the city does not put this out.
And the state auditor also promised to launch an investigation into these allegations. What's the status of that?
That's a good question. Whether the auditor Dave Bullock is still looking into this. I mean, he did, Mike, like you said, he said he wanted to understand more about the settlement. And then Chief Jennings did release the settlement. And Bullock put out a statement after that saying he was happy for the transparency, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure if that means he is done and he's not looking into this anymore or if he's still digging around.
Meanwhile, Charlotte has hired a consulting firm to conduct the search for a replacement for CMPD Chief Johnny Jennings, who announced after he agreed to the settlement offered by the city, he announced he would retire. But before we talk about the search, explain something to me, somebody. As part of this settlement, which is larger than the chief's current salary, the city paid the chief a retention bonus. Because he has subsequently announced his intention to retire, are they still paying that part of the settlement? And if so, why?
Yeah, yes, is my understanding. They are paying that settlement. I think what's been really difficult for people to understand about this entire text message potential threat of lawsuit snafu is how can you threaten the possibility of a lawsuit and then get a payment like this? I mean, wouldn't we all be doing that all the time if life were that simple? I think what people need to keep in mind is that it's not as much about the content in the text messages between Councilmember Bakari and Chief Jennings over the argument of body armor, which is kind of what a lot of this was about. It was more about the way in which Bakari delivered the message. If myself as a reporter started texting somebody I was investigating, I am going to bury you and ruin your reputation, my attorneys at WBTV would be pretty frustrated with me. I think that there is some thought of legitimate legal consequences that they could have faced because of the language of that specifically. And so a settlement was reached. I think a lot of the issue that the city has dealt with on this is how the complete lack of transparency in it until the state auditor got involved because of what Councilmember Watlington said. It's just all been a complete mess, to put it simply.
It's the local news roundup on Charlotte Talks on WFAE. But these were intended to be private communications, text messages between Tariq Bakari and Johnny Jennings. They were never intended to be public. Somehow they became public, and that is when the chief said, "This is damaging to my reputation. I think I might sue." Can you sue over private communications? I don't care who they're from.
Well, text messages between council members and chief of police are public record by nature. So those text messages, I believe, were requested by one of the esteemed news agencies in Charlotte, and a lot of Mary, please.
No. I just think it's fitting that the language was like that, and that Tariq Bakari is now, I believe, second in a charge in the transit of the Trump administration in the transit department, because we have seen how public communications with the President Trump, have become that toxic and that insulting. And so we are living in a time where this kind of language is not unusual. And so, you know, as David pointed out, now it's public record and someone was trying to hold someone to account, but you can see how that kind of, we are descending into that kind of language all the time.
So let's back up a little bit. When Patrick Flanagan, the outside attorney, conducts his investigation, will he be conducting an investigation also into why the council decided to pay out more money than the chief of police makes to the chief of police based on the threat of a lawsuit being filed, not the fact that it was?
I can't say, Mike, for sure the scope of his investigation. I think if council members bring that up in their interviews, I think he may address it. But I don't necessarily think that is the focus of what he is researching. But I could be wrong. I think on this one, we're just going to have to wait and see what's in the final report. Hard to say.
So this job opening for the chief was posted on July 18th. It remains open until August 29th. And when we come back, we'll talk about who they hired to conduct this search, what kind of a search it will be, what they're going to pay for Johnny Jennings' replacement, and more. Plus, a look at the transit bill, which is maybe coming to a ballot box near you. It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE.
humanitarian disaster. It could stop at any point. We could be putting pressure on this.
It's Charlotte Talks on listener funded 90.7 WFAE and WFAG. I'm Mike Collins. We're talking about the news. It's the news roundup. Steve Harrison is here. He's our politics reporter for WFAE News. Mary C. Curtis is a columnist for Rollcall.com, host of their Equal Time podcast. And David Hodges is an investigative reporter for WBTV. Prior to the break, we were talking about Johnny Jennings, who retires from his job as CMPD chief at the end of the year. They are opening a job search, a nationwide job search. They posted the job on July 18th. It remains open until August 29th. Who did they hire at the city to conduct this research? Steve.
The Charlotte Observer had a story about this. It looks like they've hired this California consulting firm, Ralph Anderson and Associates, to help lead the search. The city says it's going to be nationwide. I think Ralph Anderson was also hired previously when they promoted Chief Jennings to the top job.
And the city manager back in 2016, they were involved in that too. What sort of, do we know what sort of background qualifications or what they're looking for in a new chief, and who makes that decision?
Right here on the International Association Chiefs of Police hiring page, it talks about somebody with a bachelor's degree, minimum of 10 years of progressively responsible experience in law enforcement, including serving as chief of police and deputy chief of police. My sources are telling me that I believe they want to hire from outside of CMPD. It would not be surprising if an interim is appointed, if somebody has not been hired by the time that Jennings retires, but I believe they might be looking for a new face from a new place to come in and lead that.
It will be interesting to see who applies for this job. It's you can make up to $259,861, but the job of a big city police chief is challenging. Of course, Charlotte has gained a lot of publicity because of what we just finished discussing, the settlement with Johnny Jennings. We have gone through a couple of chiefs, and even though the crime rate, as they say, has been dropping, of course, Charlotte, we've had quite a few high-profile shootings, it seems, every weekend. And so, you're going to have a mayor's race coming up. So this will be interesting to see who wants to get this job. But you have a great, big budget, $360 some, I think, $million, hundreds of staff, officers, almost 2,000 officers. It's a big job. So I would be interested if we get someone from another city that's smaller looking to come up, or a larger city that wants to have this. So
Mary just said it would be interesting to see who applies for this job. And my question is, will we know who applies for this job? Because we've noticed that with a school superintendents, what used to be a parade of qualified candidates through various aspects of Charlotte society has now become very private. We don't know who they've interviewed. We don't know who gets the job until they make the announcement. Will the same be true for the chief of police?
Yeah, the North Carolina open records law allows these personnel decisions to be essentially kept private. The city, if they want, could make a condition for finalists to be to kind of announce their intentions and get to know the public. I remember the city did that 10 years or so ago when they hired a new manager. They had a handful of finalists who, kind of like did meet and greets with the public. But no, there's no requirement that all of the people who apply, their names are public or even finalists.
When Roddy Monroe, I remember when he was hired, they had the 3 finalists come, and they had, basically sessions with the public that people came to, they answered questions. And so when he was hired, I think he came from Richmond, I think the community really felt that there was a buy-in because they had really been a part of the process.
Okay. But let's talk now about something we have never talked about on this program before, the transit bill. As we know,
never.
As we know, the transit bill that would allow Mecklenburg County to hold a referendum on levying a 1-cent sales tax for transit has passed the legislature. It has been signed by the governor this week. We found out that 2 Raleigh consultants, Paul Shoemaker and Morgan Jackson, are among the marketing experts set to advise Charlotte leaders who are seeking passage of this bill. Mecklenburg County has to vote on whether or not to put this on the ballot in November. We're fairly certain, correct, Steve, that will in fact happen.
Yeah, absolutely. The
Okay.
county, I think, is scheduled to hold a public hearing next week on, whether to place this on the ballot, and then I think the formal vote to do so, I think, will be in early August. Um,
And
I
then I
think the
believe
big news.
if I'm not wrong, Steve, that the drop dead date for putting it on the ballot is early September, September 3rd. So they
Okay.
could vote, but then maybe not move forward with it. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Oh, no, it's okay. That's fine. I just, yeah, Mike, you mentioned that Morgan Jackson and Paul Shoemaker have been reportedly hired by the Business Alliance to to campaign. I mean, they are the two most prominent uh, political consultants in the state of North Carolina. Business NC reported that the alliance plans to spend roughly $3 million to get this across the finish line. So they are not playing. I mean, they are taking this very seriously to get this passed.
And the clock is ticking. It does matter because they have a lot of work to do. Even though we talk about this all the time, believe it or not, there are people out there who don't know what this is, and they'll walk into the voting booth in November and they'll be surprised and asking themselves, what is this? So they have to get the word out, and I guess the idea is to figure out a way to get voters to say yes to this. That is the job of these consultants and the other marketing people that they're hiring, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They have
Okay.
to make the case to voters. It'll be a pretty small voting pool in the November, if it goes on the November ballot. I think turnout will probably be about 15%. So it'll be a relatively informed electorate, voters who come out for city elections. But Mike, yes, there will be people who don't know about this, haven't thought about it, and the alliance wants to make the case that the tax increase is worth it to help people move around the city and plan for future growth.
David?
I think what will be really interesting is what we end up hearing in these public forums. Those are for sure going to happen over the course of August. What is so interesting about this particular timeline, as Steve mentioned, it is a low voter turnout election and people are really informed. At the same time, we are kind of in an era here where the surrounding areas of Mecklenburg County and beyond are voting about whether there's too much growth happening. So you have Huntersville and this area north of Mecklenburg County getting this red line now as part of this plan. While that might have been 100% what they wanted a year or 2 years ago, that might not be what voters want right now. So
Well,
it will be really interesting to see what they hear, and if it's still a good decision to move forward with it with such a small voter turnout.
and according to Business NC, they've taken an early poll of likely voters, and it shows that supporters it has about 50% support of likely voters, with 40% of likely voters opposed. So we're talking about a very small margin of
Slim.
error here. What do they have to say to convince people that this is a good idea? Vote yes.
It's different for every single voter. I mean, that's
And
the
that,
issue. I've interviewed people who ride the bus consistently who just want more consistency. Then you have people on the outskirts of Mecklenburg County who there might not be anything you could say that they want about this. So
and
it's different.
if you haven't been listening over the past 5 years to the ins and outs of this plan, what's going to make you listen now?
That might be the problem. I mean, I think
Okay.
it's really important for people to remember not too long ago when the county tried pushing the quarter-cent sales tax for arts and science and all of those issues. Former county commissioner Matthew Ridenhour, with a hope and a prayer and $100 in his pocket, essentially ran a campaign that defeated that quarter-cent sales tax. So while the Business Alliance and everybody is spending all this money and hiring these consultants, it might not take an expensive effort to shoot it down if somebody
Yeah.
takes that tactic.
Although, to be fair, and I think this is a simplistic summation of the sales tax for arts that we proposed several years ago, they were asking us to vote on the tax, the idea of the tax, and then say, "Trust us, we'll tell you how we're spending the
Right.
money after you say yes." That is not the case with the transit plan.
True.
So, North Carolina Senior Senator Tom Tillis recently announced that he would not run for re-election in 2026, which could work to alter control of the Senate. Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, Fox News contributor and co-chair of the Republican National Committee, and a woman with a single record coming out this week. Laura Trump was rumored to be the odds-on favorite to be the Republican candidate. She declined to run, and yesterday, Her co-chair at the GOP, Michael Whatley, announced his bid. Tell us about Michael Whatley. Steve.
Yeah, Michael Whatley is a North Carolina native. He's from Watauga County. Spent time, I think, has a house now in Gaston County. He got his start in politics as a teenager in 1984, working on Jesse Helms's reelection campaign. He was an attorney on the Florida recount for the Republicans in 2000. Then moved, he had a job in the Bush administration in the Department of Energy. And then made this transition became a lobbyist, and then made this transition from Bush type Republican to a loyal Trump supporter. He started organizing rallies for Trump in 2016 and then earned the president's trust, became chair of the Republican Party in North Carolina in 2019. And Trump has really trusted him and credits Whatley with helping him win the state 3 times.
So, Donald, I'm sorry, Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, and you can already see they're trying to paint him as, well, the Democrats are, if you elect this person, he will be a Trump rubber stamp. And that doesn't fit North Carolina, but he has all the bona fides. He's, a Trumpist at this point. And he also was very close with Mark Robinson, said he was like the best lieutenant governor. So they were going to try to paint him as another Robinson. But you see this happening all over. They're going to try to paint him as the most extreme person. But he has been all in for Trump.
So prior to this announcement that Michael Whatley was going to throw his hat in the ring and Lara Trump was not going to do so, Donald Trump said that Lara would be his first choice. So what do we know about how this decision was reached?
In terms of Lara Trump not running?
Yeah, and Michael Whatley saying, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Twist my arm.
I guess Lara Trump has the Fox News show and is kind of often flirted with being a candidate in North Carolina, but I think probably it was just in the end, a tremendous effort to run a Senate race here, and perhaps she wasn't interested. But Whatley,
she's not even registered here. I mean, she's registered in Florida. She would have had to come here.
And instantly, yesterday afternoon or yesterday evening, Trump endorsed Whatley on Truth Social, which essentially ends the Republican primary. He will be the candidate.
So will his experience, Michael Whatley's experience and connections running both the state party and the national GOP, make up for whatever deficiency he may have as an inexperienced candidate?
Yeah, I mean, he's got, as Steve mentioned, he's got all of the insider connections over decades of working in politics. So while not an experienced candidate, he's not new to this space at all.
It was already going to be one of the most watched, most expensive races. We're a swing state. The odds, the chances of Democrats overtaking the Republicans and taking back the U.S. Senate run through North Carolina. And that's why Democrats were hoping that they would get the person that they wanted, which was former 2-term popular Governor Roy Cooper. And it looks like we may get that race.
And that is what's probably likely going to happen. Roy Cooper has not yet announced we are told that he intends to announce sometime next week, but he has never lost an election for anything he's run for, and he will be likely up against Michael Whatley, who has never run for anything. So, and the Democrats are all in. The National Party is all in on Roy Cooper. What will that mean?
That will need a lot of money, a lot of ads, a lot of national attention, a lot of setting it up as the battle that may win the Senate for them. And I mean, the reason Roy Cooper, one reason he has never lost is he does his homework, and I don't think he enters into races he doesn't think he can win. So if he announces for it, there's some good research. A lot of it'll be voter turnout and voter enthusiasm. And
let me ask you this, because the National Democrats love Roy Cooper. He's pretty popular here in this state. He's a 2-time governor. Reason he's not governor now is because he was term limited. He couldn't run again. But he was rumored to be, at one point, Kamala Harris's running mate, and he says that he said the time just wasn't right, so he took himself out of that competition. What makes him so popular among national Democratic operatives? Because they're going to be pouring money into this race like there's no tomorrow.
Yes, he was on the short list. They see him as the kind of moderate that they feel can win. Some of the national Democrats, and you've seen them writing op-eds in places like the New York Times and the Washington Post, feel that Democrats, one reason that they had so many losses last fall is because there was an image of a party that had gone too far left. I'm not saying that I agree with it, but you saw all the ads about Donald Trump is for you and Kamala Harris is for they, them. They feel that Roy Cooper is Southern, white, male, moderate reputation, has worked with a Republican legislature and has had some wins, got Medicaid expansion. That was a big plus for North Carolina and in the plus category. So they see him as the kind of person they need to win in the very crucial 2026 midterms, which they feel it's the only way they can stop the steamroller of the Trump agenda.
It's the local news roundup on WFAE's Charlotte Talks. So Cooper has been rumored to have been weighing this race against Tom Tillis until Tom Tillis said he was not going to run for re-election. Will it be easier on him, Steve, to run against Michael Whatley, or more difficult? Because Michael Whatley, unlike Tom Tillis, has no record.
Yeah, and Republicans I've talked to this week, they feel now, it's not surprising they're going to say this, but they feel like they're in a better position with Michael Whatley than Tom Tillis, because of course Tillis had problems with the conservative base, and perhaps Roy Cooper would have appealed to a segment of those of those dissatisfied conservatives. With Whatley, they feel like they have kind of a blank slate, someone who has shown his loyalty to President Trump, which is very important to North Carolina.
This is an important race for the Democrats. They want to take as many governor's mansions as possible in this. And North Carolina's complexion, be it purple, blue purple, or red purple, is at play here. This was going to be a highly competitive race had it been between Roy Cooper and Tom Tillis. Will it be as competitive between Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley?
Oh, I think very much so. As Steve said, that it will bring out the base. The only thing the Democrats are saying is, well, now you have someone, Tom Tillis did get a lot of independent votes. He got some Democratic votes of folks who saw him as in the middle, although when he got into the Senate, he primarily voted with, President Donald Trump. And so I do think it will be a battle of the bases, which that might not have been the case with Tillis Cooper, but this.
So I have 30 seconds. I have 30 seconds left, and a lot of questions. Wiley Nickel is rumored to be considering a run. Will he drop out if Cooper says I'm running?
He says he hasn't quite made up his mind, but You can best be sure there'll be a lot of pressure.
And the candidate filing does not begin until December. Why are candidates declaring this far out?
You want to make money, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let the games begin.
Because it's likely to be the most expensive Senate race in the history of the country. When we
Four
come back,
campaigns, to be clear.
More on Tom Tillis and his comments recently on the Epstein files. That's coming up on Charlotte Talks. It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. It's the local news roundup. Steve Harrison is here, WFAE News politics reporter, Mary C. Curtis, roll call columnist and host of their Equal Time podcast, and David Hodges, investigative reporter for WBTV. When Tom Tillis decided not to run for re-election to the U.S. Senate, he did so while voting no on Donald Trump's signature legislation, the Big Beautiful Bill, because Tillis said it would remove hundreds of thousands of North Carolinians from the Medicaid rolls in the state. And he added that now that he will not be a candidate, he will be able to call balls and strikes without people questioning his motives. And one of those balls and strikes is advocating for opening something that runs counter to what Trump is trying to keep a lid on, and that is the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. He made his feelings about the so-called Epstein files abundantly clear during a forum this week put on by Axios.
Release the damn files. Look, it makes no sense to me. If one of two things is true, I believe. Either it's a nothing burger in terms of the evidence we have. Let's separate it from this guy being disgusting and what he did and the systematic trafficking of young people, minor age people for sex purposes. But the promise to release the files during the campaign was either overplayed and we got a nothing burger if the files get released, or it's something really disturbing, and that's actually even a more compelling reason to release it. And this nonsense of, well, we've got to protect the innocent witnesses, those sorts of things. That's called redaction. We do that all the time. That's sort of a fake or for a bad reason for trying to stop something that you don't want to happen. So I think the files should be released. Let the light of day, let the sun shine through. And that's the best way to get past it. Otherwise, if anybody thinks that this is going to go away because the House left a day early or something, it's got to be like those zombies in The Walking Dead. Every time you think you've killed it, another one's just going to come running out of the closet after you. This is going to be an issue all the way through next year's election.
That's a long clip, but I wanted to play it in full so you could hear Tom Tillis's reasoning. How many other Republicans, Steve, agree with him?
I think there are a fair amount, which is why the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, announced that they were going to be going into a summer recess early to stop all these potential votes to release the files.
Clearly Mike Johnson doesn't agree with him. As you say, he adjourned early so that they wouldn't call for the releasing of the Epstein files prior to their summer vacation. The House won't be back until September. There will be 146,000 other issues that will come up by then. But Tillis has said he believes early adjournment will not make this issue go away. Will this be on House members' minds when they come back? Will it be on voters' minds? Will it be on our minds when they come back?
It will 100% be on the minds of every Republican primary voter. And I mean, this is the issue that the Trump administration is now having to deal with. When you run on a campaign of we're going to expose the deep state and then try and keep the deep state secret, a lot of your people who are your base might not flip over and just all of a sudden go along with you. So you see Senator Tillis, who's, love it when any government official is saying, bring in sunshine and public records. But then people that I would say he wouldn't even necessarily agree with politically on the conservative side also saying they want to see a vote on this. So I don't think it's dying.
Well, Congress may be going on vacation until September, but our state's General Assembly returns next week. Recently, Governor Josh Stein vetoed Senate Bill 50. That allows anyone 18 or older to carry concealed handguns in public without a permit. And this week, a group of North Carolina mayors, law enforcement, and local leaders around the state called for the General Assembly to uphold the governor's veto of that bill. Evidently, the opportunity to override the veto has presented itself several times since the governor said no, but each time no action has been taken in the legislature. Why not? And is it likely to be taken when they return? Steve.
I think that the concealed carry bill of the potential overrides we have coming, including a further cooperation requiring sheriffs to further cooperate with ICE. I think the concealed carry bill is going to be one of the harder ones to to override. I mean, there's even been some Republicans who voted against it. So I think this is going to be a really tough override effort.
Hunters, go ahead,
Are
Mary.
against it. A lot of law enforcement folks feel that it makes them less safe. In cities where this has happened, in areas, homicide rates have gone up 27%. You have lowering the age from 21 to 18, folks without training or without a permit. They really feel, and this crosses, as Steve pointed out, party lines, and a lot of law enforcement folks don't like this bill as well. And I would also add the racial disparities. We see the case a few years ago of Philando Castile, who had a gun but also a permit and was still shot. When you have a bunch of folks with a gun that they legally have, then those things come into play as well. So you might see a lot of pushback on this bill.
And that is one of the concerns, law enforcement concerns, that Huntersville Mayor Christy Clark expressed recently, calling for the General Assembly to let the veto stand. She says the bill is, quote, not a recipe for freedom or safety. It is a recipe for more road rage, shootings, more gun theft, and more everyday arguments turning deadly. And she says it endangers law enforcement.
What we don't want to have is have our law enforcement be less safe in the line of duty as well. Huntersville is a pretty safe place, but I never want our officers to have to come upon a gun that they don't know is there and that someone has not been trained and had a background check to use.
So the legislature comes back next week. They don't have a supermajority, and we'll see what happens. Everybody wants safe streets and safe neighborhoods, and this week WBTV reported on Charlotteans along the Sugar Creek corridor in northeast Charlotte demanding change. David, be more specific.
Yeah, our reporter Matt Fernandez with WBTV spoke with a lot of Charlotteans in that West Sugar Creek area who organized a rally essentially to talk about the amount of crime that they're seeing, specifically pointing out drug dealing, prostitution. Matt's reporting found that since January 18th, there have been 396 reports of assault, theft, drug issues, and various other crimes right in the West Sugar Creek and Reagan Drive area. And I think this is a good example of, while CMPD recently reported about crime numbers overall being down, there's also a feels like factor. And if the people in these communities feel like there's not safety, that's ultimately what matters.
And Charles Robinson led this rally this past Tuesday. He's lived near that intersection of West Sugar Creek Road and Reagan Drive for decades, and he told WBTV about what he sees happening in his neighborhood.
And they got to trespass people that are sitting out throwing trash and sleeping on the ground. We have to arrest those prostitutes. We have to arrest folk that are soliciting prostitution, because our families shouldn't have to be subject to that. It should never happen. And I don't know too many places in Charlotte where this is going on.
And he also told WFAE about an issue we've been discussing on this and other programs many times, the revolving door allowing criminals almost instantly to return to the streets.
It's too many folk that are getting locked up and going right back out of that door. And it's not a Sheriff McFadden issue. It's not a CMPD issue. It is an issue with our system that's letting these people come right back out before the ink dries, that's violating our community.
And it's also an economic issue. WBTV talked to a business owner, Jeff Brody, who says if something isn't done, businesses will go away.
That's the point we're at now. We're going to have to do something, because if not, there won't be any businesses here.
So how many people showed up for this rally? Aside from those advocating for change, who else was there? Was anybody there in an official capacity, David?
I hate to speculate on numbers, but it looks like maybe a couple dozen people showed up from the community. We did reach out to Councilmember Dante Anderson, who said that it is something that the city is working on, talking about putting in new lighting and cameras to try and reduce crime in the area. CMPD has talked about how they've put more officers in the area. You know, sometimes these are very difficult issues to solve, even if you increase policing, with Charles Johnson saying that it's a systemic problem. It's more than just policing. It's more than just the jail. It's a lot of how the entire criminal system operates.
So the organizers of this rally will hold a town hall next Wednesday at the Sugar Creek Recreation Center with church and county leaders to work on finding solutions. There was a mass shooting recently in Catawba County. It was last month. at a Hickory pool party in which about 80 rounds were fired into the crowd from a wooded hillside. The bullets struck people, vehicles, homes. One person was injured while fleeing the scene. 7 individuals have been indicted by a grand jury, with each of 6 male subjects facing 63 counts of attempted first-degree murder. One person did die in this incident, but he was killed by a guest returning fire in self-defense, not by the attackers, and that guest has not been charged. But on Monday, a judge agreed to seal more 911 calls from the shooting. Why?
So I was in court for this, Mike. I had recently filed a records request for the 911 recordings and criminal reports, sheriff's office reports related to the initial response to this party. So before the shooting even happened, neighbors had called police talking about noise ordinance issues as well as underage drinking. I've been trying to investigate exactly what the deputies and Catawba County Sheriff's Office were doing up until that point. I never even received a denial to my request. The first thing I got was a motion to seal the 911 recordings related to this initial noise complaint and the response. And I was in court on Monday and found out, to my surprise, that this was to protect the prosecution of 2 people who've been charged with aiding and abetting underage drinking. Seems like a very extreme step to go to try and seal these recordings. A judge did agree, but said that these recordings needed to be released as soon as those 2 cases involving the aiding and abetting underage drinking are finalized. Just like Senator Tillis said, our opinion here in the media is that sunshine helps cure all, so we're going to try and keep fighting that good fight.
Wow. Okay. Charlotte.
Sorry about
Charlotte,
that, Mike.
That's okay. Charlotte lost another icon this week, Mary. Civil rights leader and attorney James Ferguson passed away. Talk about his accomplishments and his contribution.
Well, Fergie, as he was known and well known in the city. And that's the thing. He was so well known. At one point, he owned the Excelsior Club, which was, of course, a famous gathering spot. But he was a civil rights leader and lawyer whose influence was global. And most people know him, of course, the school integration busing Swan case. But, you know, he was in the late 60s, along with Julius Chambers and Adam Stein, the father of our governor, founding of one of the first integrated law firms in the state, and I would say probably in the region. And he also actually was global. He, in South Africa, he worked there with the trial advocacy program. He taught trial advocacy in the United Kingdom and throughout the United States. He defended the Wilmington 10, a group that was wrongly convicted of arson conspiracy in 1971 during the civil rights era for the firebombing of a white-owned grocery store. They were later bombed. And he was still an active member, taking personal injury cases for the firm that bore his name. And as I said, he was just his influence. He was a mentor and teacher of so many people in this area.
And it was that firm, that first integrated law firm, the firm of, I don't have the name of the firm here. I've lost it. But anyway, it was that firm that won the landmark U.S. Supreme Court case in 1971, Swan versus Charlotte Mecklenburg Board of Education. The Swan case that he helped prepare was argued by the famous Julius Chambers and followed the original integration order handed down by the High Court, Brown v. Board of Education, nearly 20 years earlier. 20 years had elapsed, but schools in some states dragged their feet. They came up with plan after plan that didn't work. The plan argued in the Swan case advocated busing to achieve integration in a manner that was equal across school systems. And when James Ferguson was on this program in 2021, on the 20th anniversary of the Swan decision, he explained their victory this way.
There was no argument as to whether or not the schools were being desegregated. They were not. And the Supreme Court was basically saying, we're tired of hearing excuses as to why our plans are not working. We want to see a plan that works. That's what the school system has to do. And this plan seems to be a plan that works, and we are going to approve.
That case forced CMS to use busing to integrate the schools here and eventually nationwide. And over time, CMS became the national poster child for how to successfully integrate the schools, an achievement that stood until the late 1990s, when a federal judge decided that busing had achieved its purpose and ended the order mandating it. I think that's proven to be incorrect since then, but that's what happened nonetheless. And James Ferguson died this week at the age of 82. Speaking of the courts, Ketanji Brown Jackson is coming. She's become one of the most vocal spokespeople for the court's liberal wing, and she'll be in Charlotte next month. The conversation will be at the Carolina Theater with the former Charlotte Mayor Harvey Gantt, and it will center on her memoir. But what other topics, Mary, are they likely to get into?
Well, she has been known now, obviously, she's been writing many very eloquent dissents because the Supreme Court, using the shadow docket, which means they really don't have to explain their rulings, they just hand them down, has been really the court has given President Donald Trump a lot of freedom, a green light really to fire folks that work for federal agencies. And she's been pretty outspoken about it, that she really feels that, this is really shaking democracy and a danger to democracy. So she'll be speaking with our first Black mayor, Harvey Gantt, and I'm sure she'll have a lot of insights and they'll be quoting her.
It's the local news roundup on WFAE Charlotte Talks. The court has become highly politicized by those on the outside, and some would argue they made themselves political by breaking with precedent, overturning what some have considered decided or settled law. In a recent appearance, Jackson shared some critical comments about recent events, including the state of our democracy. I'm just curious, Mary, you're a columnist, you're an opinion columnist. Is it helpful in this political climate for Supreme Court justices to speak on contemporary issues or even legal decisions or issues outside of the confines of the decisions they write on the court? Or does it run the risk of politicizing that body even more?
Well, we've seen Republicans speak to Federalist Society and so forth. I guess Jackson feels it's a break glass moment, and she has to do it.
Mary C. Curtis is the columnist for Rollcall.com, host of their Equal Time podcast. David Hodges is an investigative reporter with WBTV, and Steve Harrison is our politics reporter here at WFAE News. Thank you all for the hour.
Charlotte Talks is a production of 90.7 WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from Mazda of South Charlotte. Our executive producer is Gabe